So I had an overnight stream going so I could check and make sure that the lab wasn't on fire. And that makes a quite long stream. So if I don't stop and restart, then it's too long to save properly. And it dumps the stream and you don't get to see your glass composition. So I have to restart that, which I just did. So now it should be in good shape. All right, so once things get rolling, this will progress fairly quickly because we've got only 5 glass batches and we typically pour 10. So even though we're getting a slightly later start, you'll still get out ahead of schedule. That would be the most likely plan here. So just to remind you of a couple of things about the glass process. We went through some very preliminary stuff 3 weeks ago. We went to Cardinal Glass, saw this process on a large scale. Now we're going to finally see what our batches turned out to be. Remember the process that we're disrupting crystalline behavior. So sodium carbonate is a flux. Calcium carbonate is a flux stabilizer because it has a 2+ ion. Disrupts those bonds. The viscosity temperature relationship is important to understand with glass. Remember that viscosity is resistance to flow. Resistance to flow. So a high viscosity material pours very slowly. A low viscosity material pours right out as soon as you tip the container. Like water is a relatively low viscosity. Tar, honey, corn syrup, these are examples of kind of intermediate. Tar can be quite viscous, but every glass has a viscoelastic range that looks something like this. What changes is the temperature at which this curve is placed. So this would probably be typical of a highly fluxed leaded glass, those that they can pour into molds and make all sorts of interesting glass objects. You might wonder how they make that. Well, there's some glass compositions that pour with a crazily low viscosity. These, you'd have to get up to very high viscosities, like 1800, to get it to pour like, normal liquids that you're used to. These are all going to pour very slow by pouring standards, but they still spread out, and you'll see that behavior once we get started with the pouring. But this can change based on the chemical composition of the glass. And so if we just kept ticking up here, let's say that our glass would have a softening point and have a viscosity. Let's just say it would be somewhere around here at 1200 degrees, so all the way over here. And if we decreased our amount of flux, well, that's going to cause the whole curve to shift because we're changing how it behaves at all temperatures. And so this curve can shift based on chemical composition. If we add more flux, it shifts to lower temperatures. If we add less flux, it shifts to higher temperatures. And we have some compositions that explored that have some variation. And so when we get rolling, I'll also put the spreadsheet that we used up on the screen. Some visual clues to look for as we're pouring and as you review the video later on is the appearance of the what we call the bead of glass that's exiting the crucible. If it's a low viscosity, it pours out quickly and has a thinner bead throughout the pour. They all get thin at the end, but at the beginning, how thick is that amount? Some of them, you turn the crucible upside down and it's like you wait for several seconds, and then this blob of glass slowly exits, where for the borax glass, it's actually exiting almost instantaneously. But the thickness as it exits is a visual clue to a qualitative assessment of viscosity, low, medium, high for glass. Another clue is the resulting diameter. We have roughly the same composition weight in the crucible right now. But high viscosity glass has a harder time clearing from the crucible. And also, once it hits the metal plate, which is called the marver, it doesn't spread out as much. So as a result, the diameter of your glass is also a semi-quantitative way to benchmark relative viscosity. So we've got rulers here, and you'll just get a diameter or two. If it seems like it's perfectly round, a single diameter is pretty good. But if it seems like it's an oval, well, you pick your major axis and you pick your minor axis and you just write 2 measurements with a slash in between. That's fine. But this is another way that you can discuss or benchmark the relative viscosity of your glass. For the questions, you can relate the questions to these diagrams that are talking about composition A, the standard, and other compositions with other fluxes. We used to use more exotic fluxes. The problem is that some of the fluxes, like lithium, are so aggressive, it actually starts to soften the inside of the furnace. And so, I don't know if you can see this, but we've softened this upper layer with a combination of overheating and using certain fluxes, and it actually starts to sag. And so the newer furnace, we're trying to be a little kinder to that one. And so we're not using lithium fluxes in the new furnace because it kind of rips up the bricks and messes stuff up over time. So, but we have some representative samples with pictures and scale bars, and so you can approximate and see, okay, I can kind of benchmark that behavior. Yeah, we got a lot of glass out of that crucible. This is more typical for soda fluxes, sodium fluxes. Potassium fluxes don't flux as aggressively at all, and they often make a tighter glass at this pouring temperature that usually cracks and explodes. So that's the reason we're not doing potassium flux, is that they're unstable glasses. But you can use this to benchmark that. What's going on here is that if we compare this story, low viscosity, large disc, medium, high viscosity, small disc, you'll notice that it's kind of counterintuitive because it's opposite of the diameter. Lithium has the smallest diameter, sodium's intermediate, potassium's larger. What's going on is the lithium's so small with a +1 charge that it's able to move faster, it's able to get closer and flux more effectively than potassium, because potassium's like the big one of the group and has a harder time moving around and being as potent at that flux property. Sodium's in between. So there's that inverse relationship with diameter of a charged ion and the effect it has on viscosity. Smaller is more efficient. Larger, less efficient at changing viscosity. So these slides are your data for those questions. We don't have examples that we're making, and the question kind of implies that we are making these. Just use the picture for those questions. So as far as what to turn in, this will be due after spring break. So obviously nothing next week, but you'll have your batch record. For the batch records, I'm going to be scanning these so that we've got a record of your primary record. So after we pour the glass, I'll scan these, I'll bring them back in for you to take along, complete your lab report. But we also have that, let me pull it up here, the spreadsheet. Might take just a moment. Canvas is going to make me re-sign in here. So this will be your friend when you're trying to answer the question of compositions. So we started with, what did we start with? K. So KLMNO. Trying to show everything I want to show at once. So these are our compositions. See the silica, the flux, whether or not there's borax. This one is going to be crazy low viscosity. So we'll have to actually carefully place this one on the metal, because this one's going to, I'm predicting, be very, very low. That'd be kind of cool. We've never had this much boron in the glass before, so I really don't know what's going to happen. It'll probably smoke a little bit too. Don't breathe that.
Yeah, you've got the cool.
Yeah, we'll see. The cobalt and the iron in that one should make kind of a blue-green, but what you're being asked to put on the lab form is the percent ion in the final batch. So to explain how that's calculated, when all this heats up, the carbonates give off carbon dioxide and the batch loses some weight. And so since we're talking about L, it starts off at 165 grams. At the end, it's only 128 grams because of the carbon dioxide that is, and there can be some water that exits from borax, let's say, some other ingredients. So we're left with 128 grams. And then you take this amount of cobalt oxide, and cobalt oxide is 0.786%, 78% cobalt, and the remainder is oxygen. And so you take this mass times 0.786, and then you divide that mass of metal over the batch weight, and that tells you the percent of ion in that final batch that's responsible for the color that we'll see. And so that particular batch would be 0.003%. So this is as a percentage already, where this one is not. That's a decimal percent. Hopefully that's not overly confusing here. But as a percent, 003 low cobalt and 0.5% iron. And so those are the values that you would use to describe the color of your batch. And that's what you're going to be recording for viscosity in this table, diameter, whether it shatters. We'll have a few of those. Well, we might not have a few of those, but we did on the last group. But this is the table that spreadsheet will really help you out with. And then some wrap-up questions. So any questions on the preamble there? That's the information for success here. So the next thing is I'm going to be putting on a shiny reflective suit because it's just kind of my style. Actually, it's the furnace. The radiant heat would actually ignite my clothes on fire. And I had a guy one year that was like, "Really, Dr. Ray? Would you really catch on fire?" So I'm like, "Well, come up here." So I held it. I'm not going to do it, but I held a sheet of paper like this on this furnace, and I had somebody just crack this open a little bit, and just holding it there. And it was like 1, 2, flaming. See, I don't want this to happen. And he's like, huh. So we're above the auto ignition temperature of cellulose, of paper. And so even these gloves that are fire resistant, when I'm pulling the last crucibles, there'll be smoke coming off of them. They're off gassing something. So radiant heat is actually a pretty significant hazard. So anyway, that's why I get to wear the cool suit. It's not exactly comfortable either. So
Pretty hot suit.
yeah, exactly. It's a cool hot suit. Now I will need some volunteers to help with some of the processing here. So let me describe the jobs. So we've got 5 different positions, some of them more active, some of them more passive, just in case, let's say. So let's just go in order of the workflow, but this will have you up close working with the glass. We all will need to wear our goggles because there's potential for shattered glass. Now, when glass shatters, we use the term explodes, but that's not quite giving you the right connotation. Come on. Trying to just reposition here for the pour station, but when the glass shatters, it has tension in the disc of glass that we pour. And so when it explodes, it's not like a grenade with a radial pattern that you have to, like, dive on the duck and cover, dive on the ground. It's actually the opposite. When it shatters, it spalls outward. And so you'll end up with this like parabolic arc that is going kind of in this down direction right here. And so you can get some glass chips. And so those that work up here, you have to be aware of that. It doesn't like hurt when it hits you, but it is sharp, so you wouldn't want to touch it. But occasionally there's a few little glass chunks that hit you in the feet. But that's kind of rare, but it actually happened 4 times last time. So you can see 2 of them were after we were done though. But a couple of these happened early on. Color is still pretty cool, but the glass became unstable, and you'll learn about why at the end of that lab report. There's some indication, some videos, Smarter Everyday videos of how that stress can take place in glass. So, but anyway, the jobs. The first job is the door. And so I'll just explain them all first before we find who wants to do what. So the door, you'll probably have a heat-resistant glove, and I'll be pivoting and working with the tongs, but you'll just do a slow up, and then once I've pulled it, slow down, and you have to be, and that's hot enough it does kind of hurt. So that door frame has brick on the inside that's brittle and also really hot. So if you're jarring that door, you run the risk of cracking that brick and having brick fall and creating some mayhem down below. So it's slow at the beginning and slow at the end. And you can be a little quicker in the middle, but you need to just kind of be really careful when you're seating the door and when you're starting, when you're hitting the end stop at the top. That's door. So then I'm pouring the glass, and I'll need someone to, in this case, you wear a nitrile glove to just knock down the radiant heat. The big thermal gloves, you could use an orange heat glove if you want to. But for that one, as the glass exits, if you've got some experience with plumbing torch or brazing or whatever, propane torch, there's an inner hot zone and an outer zone. You want the glass to be in that inner hot zone about an inch from the surface. And it's a slow pull trigger. This one's a little bit finicky. So you have to push to get gas flow first. Come on. and then the piezo, which is clearly malfunctioning part of the time, will ignite it. If you pull too quick, what happens is it starts sputtering on the hot glass, and you think it's ignited, but it's not. It's igniting on the hot surface. So make sure you pre-ignite and then move in like this. And then once I pull the crucible to set here, you will fire polish that surface so that the defect from the glass strand will pull into the glass and make a nice disc. So that's a job that's probably the most active of the whole set if you wanted to try that. The next one also gets you up close and personal is the stamp. And so we're 2023, so die number 3, and our first composition is composition N, and so you'll find 3 in. And when you stamp the glass, you'll want to have the dies oriented so that it will be 3 in, just like it says on the batch record here, 3 in. And the way to verify you've got the dies oriented properly, which I clearly don't at the moment, it looked good, but the 3 is backwards, is you just kind of press it, not too hard, but gently on your skin, and you'll be able to see an impression, leaves a good impression, of what it would look like after stamping because you just kind of put it on your skin. And so I can see now that I've got it oriented properly because it's now proper so that it will be right when stamped. It doesn't look right when you're looking at the dies. So for that one, you have this piece of glass sitting there. You also probably will want to wear a glove because the radiant heat is significant. And then you will stamp about in the bottom centimeter of that glass disc, and you just kind of push it in, sort of like you're making a seal in hot wax or making, I don't know, whatever. It just kind of sinks in a little bit. You don't have to push too hard, but just sink it in the glass a little bit, and that way, after it cools, we'll still be able to tell what the compositions are because we'll have lots and lots of glass pieces. And so we can see this one is 3i. So that we know this batch is that one on number 9 there, and we know exactly what's in this. That's a low cobalt oxide glass, 3i. Otherwise, I'd have no idea what all these pieces of glass are. So that's why the stamp is there. So that's already set up for the first one. The next one is the most passive role, but potentially the most exciting if anything ever happens, which it never has. But I need somebody to be a fireman to just stand by this, and in the event that Dr. Ray catches on fire, you can provide assistance as needed. Now, I'm not supposed to have that fire extinguisher because they're like, you're just supposed to use the one out in the hall. Well, I'm like, I don't want to use the one out in the hall because I want to have it by where a potential fire would be because that does happen on fairly frequent occasion here. Like, well, but we haven't given people fire extinguisher training. We don't do that here. First, the question is why? Second, the question is, it's really complicated, right? It's the word pass. You ever had fire extinguisher training? Anybody? Fire extinguisher training. It's the word pass. I'm not going to dispense this, but P, pull the pin. A, aim at the base of the flame, not the flame itself, the base of the flame. S, squeeze and sweep side to side. There you go. Fire extinguisher training. Every fire extinguisher training I've ever been in has some guy on screen talking about pass, pull the pin. So pull, aim, squeeze, sweep. And now what we're not doing in that 5-second training is going out to like a backyard or parking lot or something and they build a bonfire and then repeatedly put it out with a fire extinguisher. So we'll skip that part. But talking with bureaucracies is sometimes like a broken record. You're like, well, we don't want students fighting a fire. We just want them to safely and calmly exit the building. And I'm like, well, what if the fire is blocking the exit? We don't want you fighting a fire. We just want you to safely and calmly exit the boat. What if the student is on fire? We don't want you to fight the fire. We just want you to safely and calmly exit. So there's gaps in the state logic on some of this stuff. And yes, they provide fire extinguishers. I'm being a little bit ridiculous, but they used to be everywhere, and there's far fewer because it costs to have them inspected. And they're on a periodic cycle, and so I get it. Everything has a risk, reward, and maybe this is what OSHA says is the current standard, but I don't know. So that's the rationale. But all you really have to do for that is just know that you're the guy with, or the individual with, the responsibility that if something cuts loose, like I said, it never has. I've tried to eliminate as many possible risks as I could. And then the final one is just the coordinator. And so I just need somebody that is here with eyes on the diagram, and this is a fairly simple one with just 5 this time. But I've got a firing diagram that shows what batch is where, and that way I'll be able to coordinate and describe the composition of that batch before we pour it, so we'll know what to look for. So let's get the volunteers, hopefully. So anybody want to be the door? Door, thank you. Anybody want to be the torch? Torch, torch, torch. Okay, thank you. How about stamp? Anybody want to stamp the glass? Stickers on the stamp. All right, stamp. What about fire? Okay. I'll be the coordinator. You get to stand by it too. Maybe the firefighter. Well, I'll let you talk it over. You know, maybe you guys can describe that. But you volunteering for one of these? Anybody else want to be the coordinator? Great resume material. You don't usually get to do anything as the fireman, but it's just a title. You can both be the fire person. Yeah, it's like so anyway, the final job, just keep an eye on the coordination. You may want to be coordinator. This is always the one that people are like, no, I got to read something. No. Anybody? Is that going to work? Okay, perfect. All right, so put your goggles on, and let's pour some glass here. I've never had that much like debate on the jobs. That was very impassioned debate. I mean, that's good because it shows we care, right? So.
Which glove do I get?
Right. So for door, these or these are fine, and you may only need one. For the stamp and the torch, just like one of these is enough because it just needs a little bit of knockdown on that radiant heat. And the torch is either one of those or a orange thermal. So let me grab both. Yeah, you don't have to hold it, but looks like I have lots of left gloves and a couple destroyed right gloves. It's not working out well. Anyway, here's yeah, you can try those, see if that is enough. So it's just a slow pull, and then it should click at the end. Keep going. There you go. Yeah, that one's tricky. Maybe I should just replace it. I don't know. Seems like the story of almost everything here is like, is it time to replace this? Well, I don't know. Does it still work? Kinda. That's fine. So, well, I mean, if I was making a big enough stink, we could get whatever we need. But it's always like, is this time? I mean, it's work. So I don't know. It's probably part my problem, part overly stingy, frugal state of Wisconsin on certain items, but not on others. I mean, it's kind of weird. Yeah, you raise a good point. There's pockets of high expenditure and there's pockets of lower than maybe what could be ideal. Yeah, I don't know.
It's just my grapes.
Yep. Okay, so we're ready to go now. So let's pour 3 in, or no, 3.
Would be there.
We're starting here. So KL.
Gotta record which ones go out. If you could.
Oh, okay. It's also should be captured on video, and so it's our primary observation as well as backup. But yeah, make whatever notes you'd like. So we'll start off with 3K. This is, yep, left side. We've got a Silica Beach sand. That's the Lake Michigan sand. This one, yeah. So that's it. It's a fairly now, this one does say it has 5 grams Gersley borate. Who was composition A? Is that you guys? Or I'm not A, sorry, K. It's been a couple weeks, right? Chase? Yeah. So I thought that was you guys. So it looks like 85 silica. There is half 5 grams borate. I'll add that to the table. That exact ingredient wasn't there. We usually just include that one here. And then some washing soda, crushed limestone. So these are some interesting source materials, not just the straight stuff. Copper oxide. So we'll have a copper blue, lower viscosity glass. All right, so let's pull K. Just kind of out. Yep, pull out slowly, and then there you go. Okay, you can go ahead and start firing. A little closer, that's good. Kinda, yeah. All right, so now you can hit that top part, keep going, and try to get that to pull in flat. Keep going. Right about there is good. And so then just kind of gently press in. Yep, perfect, that's good. So I can already see some interesting green color on the strand. This little bit here cools first. And resist any urge to touch fiberglass. It has a way of breaking unexpectedly and stabbing you. I've had that happen to myself before. So there's going to be little spines of glass up here. They're like, you know, porcupine quills. They bend a little bit, but then you're like, wow, this is really flexible. And then right when you say that, it snaps and sticks you like a hypodermic needle on the finger. It's so I'll be breaking all those off and making it the crucible safe for inspection a little after we start. Few bubbles in this glass. It looks pretty well melted, but it's a nice green color. It's kind of a dark green. Yeah, I guess the K didn't get fully recorded, but it's that copper and the iron from the limestone that's probably responsible for that color. All right, perfect. 3L is the one that's the highest borate I've ever done. Yeah, I'm a supporter of new and improved. So beach sand, Gersley borate, 10 grams borax, sodium carbonate, calcium carbonate, sodium sulfate, light, heavy, iron oxide, cobalt oxide. Yeah, there's a lot of ingredients going on there. So I'm gonna pour this one and give it a little more expansion because I really don't know exactly how big it's gonna be. It shouldn't be more than twice, but it'll be bigger than this, I think. And so we'll kind of focus right there. So composition L, 3L. Okay. Try not to breathe the smoke if it comes your way. I think it's going mostly straight up. Okay, looks good. That is big flat disc. Perfect. Yeah, that's nice. It's kind of an unusual color too, kind of orange, brown. The colors change over time as it cools. So that's sort of like a brownish yellow. But now watch, here comes the cobalt coming in. If you watch the edge right here, it started off brown, but I'm seeing a little bit of a blue starting in. So as it cools, it does what's called striking. At what color or what temperature does the final color strike is the question in the glass industry. And that depends on composition. So yes, you'll also hear what's called crazing. So crazing is when there's a differential rate of thermal expansion. The ceramic shrinks at a different rate than the glass. At the beginning, the glass is flexible and it's able to shrink and compensate, but eventually the glass hardens to the point that it can't move anymore, and so then all it can do is break. And so as the crucible and the glass shrink at different rates, you'll see little cracks that will form, and you'll actually see every time you hear something, a microscopic crack just zips across and eventually makes a crackle pattern all through the glass. Yeah, I can see them right now too. What's that? Yeah, exactly. It's like Rice Krispies, but glass. So that would be for like the Grinch. You saw him eating glass bottles, right? So, yeah. Okay, so next up, 3M. Yeah, this has such a low viscosity that it actually fixed itself. It's like, this is Wolverine glass. It got stamped, but then it was like, nope, we're just gonna heal it. So we'll know which one it is because it's the only one that looks like that. So Wolverine glass. So 3M is a lot of stuff again. So that's Lake Michigan sand, sodium carbonate washing soda, crushed limestone. So half pure, half unpure calcium carbonate, and 0.5 copper. So that's going to be a fairly high load of copper. I mean, I guess we've gone up to 2 before, and so this isn't like crazy high, but it'll be a darker blue than the others. Another interesting effect with copper glass is copper is a very easy to reduce metal, and so the carbon monoxide in the middle of the flame, it turns into carbon dioxide by the time it exits the flame, but in the middle of the flame, it's actually enough to reduce the metal, the copper, in the surface layer of the glass. And so we actually see a brown copper flash on the top of the glass here, but if you look through it, you won't see it. It's in reflection, but not in transmission. So this glass, which we'll pour right here, will also exhibit that behavior. Another thing to do with the torch is do your best to keep the flame for this one off of the previous glasses, because that can make hot spots and lead to shattering. So always try to angle strategically and choose an angle where the flame isn't touching the previous. It gets hard once this gets filled. So we don't have that many compositions today, so it won't be as bad. All right, so pulling from the middle, 3M. I think we're ready. Oh, there we go. All right, so hit that little top part there. That's probably fine. So that was definitely a lower viscosity glass. All right. And watch your sleeves on that. If your sleeves touch the glass, it could actually still, it probably would only singe it at this point, but I've seen some close calls with that too, where previous glass is still really hot. So that was much different in viscosity. All right, 3N. Yeah, 3N is next. Let me think about that quick. Yeah, maybe it's just because I'm starting to get used to seeing some borate containing glass. That one was a little bit tighter than the others, but this was medium borate, high borate, no borate. That tells a pretty clear story that borate's playing a major role in that viscosity for this set. So in, pulling from the back, left. And this one is silica. We got some alumina on this one. Spoiler alert, the alumina sometimes makes the glass too tight. Alumina seemed like it was related to some shattering on the Tuesday crew. Now, I did crush, I think, this batch up a little bit better, but to compensate for that, I'm hoping I mix the alumina in really thoroughly, but we'll try anyway. But this one should be the lowest viscosity glass of them all. But beach sand, alumina, sodium carbonate, crushed limestone, manganese purple oxide, and cobalt blue oxide. So this will be bluish purple probably, and high viscosity. This is a very bashful glass. We'll put this one here. All right. And this one looks like it bubbled over a little bit. So angle a little bit more. Okay, that'll work. That's all right. Maybe approach from the other side for that one. All right, that looks good. All right, that'll work. Okay, so definitely not as much recovery from the crucible, and it looked like this one was so thick that as the carbon dioxide was bubbling out, it actually made it bubble over, and so there's now a layer of that glass eating the brick in the furnace. So I'll have to adjust that, replace a brick or two. So let me take care of a couple of these stingers here. All right, only one more. Yeah, I was expecting bluish purple, but that one's like, nope. Give it time though. These can change color as they cool. Right now we're kind of looking green. We'll see if some blue purple eventually. Is it changing or not? I think it is changing. We'll keep an eye on that one. So for the last one, put it right here and try to angle the torch pretty aggressively in this direction. Yeah, and just watch out for the heat from that one. But we'll pour that one here. All right, the last one is O. And so that's granusil. That's a high purity sand. Sodium carbonate, calcium carbonate, copper oxide. This is a simple composition with 0.3 grams of copper oxide. Okay. Okay. All right, so that's mission accomplished on jobs here. So now we have a little bit of a waiting game because you can't touch that, MC Hammer style. It's way too hot. That's an interesting color right now though, kind of a turquoise green. Yeah, it's slowly changing. Now we did have some that shattered last time, so what I'm gonna do is call out an approximate diameter without touching it, just to get something just in case. And so this first one looks like around 74 millimeters. This one is approximately 87. The next one, approximately 63. This one's approximately 58 or 59. Let's call it 59. And these are approximate because I'm not touching. So we'll have to remake if they survive. This one's crazy hot, burning my finger. That one's around 64. So those are preliminary in case they shatter. This next part, we're gonna watch thank you for your help with that, 2 videos showing the different contexts of glass. Now, this is highly unusual because this might be the first time in history that my class actually went to Cardinal Glass before making their own glass. So we've already got a different perspective on this. But I keep the camera rolling, so we'll see what happens in case any of them shatter. But let's take a look at those videos. First one is on art glass. Has anybody ever been to a glass blowing shop? Seen people working glass, hot glass?
No, but I've watched 30 jobs.
Okay, yeah, he highlights some of that. But you can take a bubble of glass on a blow tube and make it into all sorts of different forms. So the first video we're gonna watch is, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes on Dale Chihuly's hot glass shop. He's one of the most famous glass artists probably in history, but he's kind of a unusual guy. He's kind of shorter with poofy hair, and he's got an eye patch that I used to think had something to do with the glass, but turns out it's not. He's just in a car accident, but he's crazy well respected in the glass world. Gets millions of dollars for glass installations at airports, fancy museums. It's pretty incredible. So we'll look at that. This is a retro video we've been showing for 13 years, so it'll definitely have a retro feel to it. It was old when I got it. Probably a late 90s, early 2000s. And so then after that, we will look at glass, bottle, and jar manufacture, and that way you kind of see it from both perspectives.
Suggestions to help.
Tell us where we are. Okay, we're at the Boathouse, Dale Chihuli's studio and home in Seattle, Washington. This is where Dale's work is made and where we conduct most of the business that he does. This is the hot shop where we have hot glass.
We first met Joe, who was telling us a little bit about why Seattle is so good for glass blowing, and it's because its climate is not too hot, not too cold.
Our glass is 2,150 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's the working temperature of the glass. In order to melt it, we put it on what's called high fire, and it goes up to 2,500 degrees to melt it. So we should take a trip to the furnace.
Okay.
That's
That's a statement I never really expected to hear.
Oh no.
We're going to take a trip to the furnace.
Trip to the furnace.
What are we doing now?
Well, I'm going to gather this, what we call a little gather here, and I'll, the pipe kind of heats up as we stick it in the furnace there. Wow. So we have this little device to keep ourselves from burning ourselves on the pipe. Turn, and then you kind of let it fall on center. There you go. It cools off.
Yeah.
There you go. See? Natural. That's the right. Hang it down and it'll go down.
Is the burn unit nearby?
We have a little device over there that patches us into the fire department. Kind of come out.
Yeah.
And then you lift it on out of there. Okay. Up and out.
There you go. Keep turning. Wow. Good. Keep turning. Good.
There you go. There you go. Now this is the marver. This is what we call the marver, and now you are marvering. Marvering the glass.
Marver is just heavy metal?
Yep. Very good. Oh, and this is a good shot coming up here too. This is what we call a roller wrap.
We'll return to Foster in just a second. Oh, they're applying the red to it? Right.
Yeah. And these rollers are offset, so the bubble moves down and the color goes on it.
It's like taffy.
Hale founded it.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. He was the founder of the school.
So is he like the main glass man in Seattle?
He's about the main glass man in the world.
Really?
Yeah.
I was running school here at the University of Washington and was taking a degree in interior architecture. Started getting interested in glass, started melting glass, and one night I blew glass out of a little kiln. And then from there I decided I wanted to be a glass blower.
Well, what we're working on today are these wall pieces, okay? And what you see a dark bubble on the inside?
Yeah.
That's actually an air bubble with a thin layer of color. That Bennett right there is about to drop on to the pipe. We're going to just reheat it, shape it, and with my great team, we'll hopefully get it in the box.
So,
Open
stay out of your way. Where should we
No, I don't want you to stay out of the way. I want you to get right in my. I'm going to have you help me a little bit here.
Martin works for me, but he also works on his own work and has his own exhibitions. And many of the glass blowers that have worked with me have gone on to develop their own careers. Some of them, like Martin's, you know, stay around and still work for me. Others go out on their own entirely. But there are some, I don't know if anybody told you, but there's something like 50 glass shops now, glass furnace studios in the Seattle area.
It's not really glass blowing, it's more like glass shaping. There's a lot of prep work into shaping the bubble and very little blowing.
Well, glass blowing is difficult to get started in because you have to have the equipment. So you've got an initial outlay of, you know, a couple $100,000 just to have a small glass shop, and then to run it costs a couple $1,000 a day.
Actually, what you're gonna do is, these are wooden paddles and they're to protect me from the heat.
Okay.
All right?
Teamwork. Hey.
You guys are awesome.
Oh, wow. I can't believe you can even talk.
If you're wondering what he's holding on to, he's smoothing the glass with wet newspaper. Turns out if you soak a folded pad, a thick pad of newspaper in water, that's actually enough steam protection to prevent it from burning your hand. You couldn't do it forever, but you've got 30 seconds, minute and a half before it heats up the thing to the point that it starts frying your hand. But that water gives you a lot of protection. So that's just, you can do this with hot newspaper. I was surprised when I learned that. Or wet newspaper.
Cap.
Oh my gosh. Should it be up there for you? Wow.
Low? Yeah, shoot my chin. Stop blowing. All right, good. Level. Tip up. Right here. Don't stop. I'm right there.
This climate is conducive to glass blowing. It's not too hot. You know, the only really bad climate for a glass blower is a hot one.
When you blow glass, you blow the bottom of the vessel first. And now we're going to break it off the blowpipe.
Okay, cool.
Glass always breaks the coldest spot, right? So just a little drop of water here, drop of water there.
Whoa, wow, there it is.
Is that cool?
What you saw down there was, those techniques have been used for 2,000 years.
Squeeze them together so you get in. Good. Now push down. Okay. Good. Hit the lip pad with one paddle. Good, man. You are on the ball. I'm just pushing down. Push harder. Push harder now. Ease into it. Push harder. Push. Let them open up. Good. Push, 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 push. All right. Now when it starts to feel like it's not moving anymore, you're done. We've got as much work on that heat as we could. Now come out. Good job.
Whoa. These were on
Nice.
fire. And
That
so
was
was
good. Full heat, Paul. All right, I'll take those.
Okay. So what's that?
That was good. We got about 2 heats left.
Okay.
What we're doing now is we're going to peel this ball open flat to make the wall piece.
This part, obviously what they're doing there isn't exactly safe, but we're doing a cold quench of the glass onto metal, and we're not doing an annealing step. That makes this glass have high internal stress. You'll learn about that in the end of the lab report. In order to relieve that stress, you can relieve that by going to a temperature that's not near melting, but it's above what's called the strain point of the glass or the annealing point of the glass. And so if we annealed these, it would release the stress from the glass that we're going to look at with this light table over here when we're done. But this is the step where you'll notice I'm putting it into a different oven to anneal that glass, which stabilizes it from spontaneously cracking. So that's what we're about to see here.
All right, so is your coolest part?
Here, well, yeah, essentially their ovens are 900 degrees. The timing is just critical on that because you got about, while it's heating, that all the work we all were doing comes down to that very last heat. That's where the shape is made, that's where the beauty happens, that's where the nuance, the delicacy of the whole piece. All that work is just for that one heat. And then in a few seconds, you come over here, and if your timing's off, crash, it falls on the floor. Where do you get your inspiration from?
I'm lucky in that the ideas come to me. You know, I probably don't run out of ideas. You know, sometimes you wonder if you run out of good ideas. Glass is a lot like water. You know, there's a lot of, I like water, I like glass, I like ice. There's a lot of characteristics. And it also kind of works like the ocean, makes forms like the, you know, there's some connection between all of that. So I end up blowing glass and stuff, everything. Half the stuff I make looks like it comes out of the ocean, even if you don't want it to. I like the rain. It's really, I find it conducive to thinking. And I always tell people, if you had to write a book, you want to go to the Caribbean to write the book, or you want to go to Ireland, which is a lot rainier than Seattle. And where are they going to write the best book? Even most people admit it's going to probably be Ireland. Somebody who's an aspiring glass blower, where do they want to go? They want to move to Seattle, because here we've got, you know, more glass activity than anywhere else. And Venice has more glass factories and furnaces in Seattle, but we're second to Venice. And I think I would be proud to say that we probably have more glass artists.
Okay, so that's the artistic side of glass. Here are some of the crazy things that he and his team have been commissioned to make. Just imagine the time necessary to blow all those jars and then arrange them like this. Spiral neck jars, bottles, I don't know what they would call it, but forms. After this class one year, a couple years ago actually, a guy went down to Indianapolis Museum of Art and was like, just blown away. He says, I go into this hall and it says it was an exhibit by Del Chihuly, and he's like, I know all about this guy now because we talked about him, and he's like, it gave a different perspective on it. So you'll encounter these glass things maybe unexpectedly, Philadelphia, Indianapolis, different airports, abroad, who knows. So that might not be your thing. Maybe it is. I think it's pretty cool. This is more in the wheelhouse of a lot of engineering mindset of glass. Just to orient you to what you're seeing, imagine that instead of taking the cardinal glass furnace and going long ways into plate glass, window glass, you've got drains on the bottom that are going through a metering valve, and it's going to make 3 blobs of glass, and so you're going to see this blob oozing through. That's through some kind of a metering valve at the bottom of this furnace that's metering this. And then this place must be an enormous basement because they utilize the falling glass, and it will fall through concentric dies that shape it as it's falling. Then it goes to this scoot that looks like something out of Star Wars to me, to these bottle formers. So the blob of glass goes in, converted to what's called a parison. The parison gets transferred to a blow mold that then inflates the bottle and then pulls the glass out to go to the annealing layer to prevent cracking like we just talked about for the other glass. But keep your eye on the timing. As this mold is clamped and forming this bottle, the next blob of glass has already started falling, already in the air. And then they remove that glass, close the form again, and instantaneously that next blob of glass falls in. Just think about the timing. I mean, time is money, so they're getting the maximum production rate, but they are pushing it on that stage of the video, and I could imagine that just going off or something goes down and blobs of glass are just flying all over this place. But it's all very well tuned in this video. So anyway, glass bottle manufacturing. After a word from our sponsors.
Glass is made of natural ingredients that are abundant. Making it uses less energy than producing metal or plastic, and it can be endlessly recycled. Whether they're coloured or clear then, glass bottles and jars are always green. The recipe for glass combines several natural raw materials. The main ones are silica sand, soda ash, and limestone. Silica sand usually makes up about 45% of the batch. The soda ash helps melt the silica evenly. It makes up about 15%. A limestone content of about 10% makes the finished glass more durable. These ingredients are combined with recycled glass called cullet. The factory's equipment feeds precise amounts of the materials into a furnace. After 24 hours at 1500 degrees Celsius, a gooey liquid that's the consistency of honey is produced. The molten glass pours out of the furnace. Shears cut the flow at precise intervals to produce cylindrical globs. Each glob is the exact amount required to make up one bottle or jar. They drop to a device called the scoop. The scoop moves them to troughs that feed them to jar-forming and bottle-forming machines. A glob of molten glass goes into a preliminary mold. In a matter of seconds, it comes out as a miniature version of the bottle, known as a parison. Each parison then moves into a blow mold, the cavity of which is the shape of the final bottle. The equipment blows compressed air into the parison, stretching the glass outward towards the wall of the mold cavity. This process creates the final bottle shape and hollows out the inside. These are amber-coloured beer bottles. The colour is produced by adding small amounts of iron, sulfur and carbon to the glass.
These tanks periodically vent like this, so it's liquid nitrogen. There's nothing really you can do about it. It's just slowly venting pressure, so you might get a major vent here in a second. What's that? Yeah, so what's going on is that this is supposed to be maintained at 230 psi, and it's the tank of liquid nitrogen that we're using for gas use off the top. And it's supposed to last for a month or two, or a month and a half. But at the moment we're up to 250, so it's bleeding down that pressure back down to 235, but probably not at a rate that I might want to wheel this thing out in the hallway just to. After it vents a bit, you can also accelerate it being quieter by heating this up with a hairdryer. Don't know how to heat it up. You can always tell who's in charge by who has the big wrench, so we'll just pop the regulator and move this in the hall. So it's probably going to vent more that I start shaking it around, so brace yourself. I can still hear it hissing, but not as much. So, okay, sorry about the interruption there.
This mix. A similar manufacturing process is used to produce other types of bottles and jars. In this run, the company is making 375 milliliter wine bottles out of clear glass. This run is producing bottles also out of clear glass. This mold though has a special feature, a recessed insignia on one of the walls, which produces a raised insignia on the front of the bottle. After the bottles leave the forming machine, they travel through flames. Otherwise they would cool down too quickly and crack from thermal shock. A loader now gently pushes the bottles into what's called an annealing layer. The bottles cool at a controlled rate as they move through the layer. This gradually releases the stress from the glass. As the bottles exit, they're sprayed with lubricant. This enables them to move smoothly through the rest of the inspection and packaging line. The bottles now single file to head into the automatic inspection station. As the machine spins each bottle, cameras and probes check for imperfections such as cracks or bubbles. The inspection equipment then examines the top to check dimensions and ensure the threads for the screw cap are molded correctly. Before shipping, each bottle gets a final visual inspection. The proportion of cullet in glass can be as high as 90%. Cullet melts at a lower temperature, so for every 10% of cullet in the mix, the factory uses up to 2.5% less energy to produce its glass. Now that is a clear incentive to recycle.
So let's see how our temperature is doing. I think we're probably okay. When I pour a full plate of glass, it takes longer for it to cool. So you can see some glass from the previous group, as well as some from previous semesters. So I'll lay those out here, but then I want to give you a quick indication of how this works with internal stress. And kill that buzz that's humming over the speaker there. So as the glass cools, it is going from a very viscous like liquid to a amorphous solid. And as that happens, parts cool faster than others, and you get this internal stress as the internal liquid, as it solidifies, is pulling against that solid. And you may not have done this before, but you can see internal stress fields in an oriented material such as a plastic or glass using cross-polarized film. So at the moment, this is not cross-polarized. This is in the same direction, but as I turn this, I can turn light on and off based on orientation of these films. You can think of it like waves going through a picket fence. It's a model. It's not exactly right, but it's not exactly wrong either. So the electric field vector is going up and down. It can propagate if it goes through slats in a fence, but if I were to shake the rope this way, it wouldn't be able to propagate through the fence. So you can think of these like 2-picket fences. Well, if I cut out the vertical ones and I cut out the horizontal ones, well, nothing goes through. Unless it has its own ability to twist the plane of those vectors. And that's exactly what stress fields in glass can do. So if I put these in a cross-polarized orientation, and then I put a film on top, I can now see a pattern, a rainbow-like ring pattern, that the tighter the bands are, the higher the internal stress field is. So that's useful. You can analyze injection molded plastics. You can see all kind of wild patterns here. And so what we'll do is go ahead and move your glass up here to the light table, and then you can see your internal stress fields and do your measurements. Still wear your goggles up here. These things can actually shatter up to a year after being made. Crazy, but true. And I guess we'll try to put them in the order. That double borate is the thinnest glass we've ever made. That's something. But we'll move these over, and then I'll try to safe the crucibles up here so that you can look at the color on those too. But again, don't touch fiberglass. It's your enemy at the moment. We got some interesting colors here. And then so you can see how things have gone in some previous semesters. I've got a bunch of other samples here to look at colors and similarities and differences. So feel free to run up here now, grab a ruler, do your final measurements, look at the internal stress fields. Take a picture of them too, you know, that you can include that in your lab report. And so, but it should be safe now to measure. But again, do wear your goggles in case unexpected shattering occurs. Yeah.
What is this compared with A viscosity rating?
So that would be compared to disc A in that picture. You can get kind of an approximate diameter to compare with these. And so A was in a few pictures up in the pre-lab. That's, I guess, a different document if you don't have the instructions. But yeah, that one. If you scroll down a few pages, A is right there. Yep. Yep. That one's still got a little bit of heat. You have to use a designated file for this. This isn't good to do for a file you plan to use on anything else in the future. They eventually, in theory, can be used for similar glass, but since we're always using different compositions, they just kind of stack up and wait for me to figure out what to do with them. And if there's too many of them, yeah, they eventually do get tossed. Not quite safe for a coffee mug. Little shards of mystery stuff inside, but kind of cool. They can withstand multiple heat cycles, so we have reused some, but it's tough because they're all slightly different compositions.
So, you just have the glass? Or?
Potentially, eventually. So if it sits there for a while and we kind of verify it's stable, I always talk about working out an annealing protocol that would safe the glass for ever, whatever. So stay tuned on that one. They'll still just be hanging out here at the front for quite a while. So I'm gonna go get scan your batch records, and then you can have those back once I get a copy. So I will go do that. I'll be right back. There we go. I was trying to find it. So
Yeah, it's got two stress points and then a bit of a stress line.
Yeah, we use that.
Okay, I'll be right back.
I don't know which one's which. Yeah, thank you.
Which one's up?
I think it's so many boxes.
I think we all just use it's like, is it how much?
I'm gonna have to go back and I'm sure it says so.
So it's ours one that's less.
Yeah. Except for the 75.
That's what this is big.
Well, see. Yeah. For K, don't know. Because K is like 75. It's almost equal to A.
Where's A?
A is from the sheet. A is this.
So what's
It's like,
oh, so that's set food? Yeah, it's not.
Yes.
it's not 71.
I guess you could just say food.
Less.
Less. Would be less. But all the fluxes are NA.
I don't know how to tell what the fluxes are in the sheet. Is it just like,
Is it the second one? Or these are the fluxes? Or
that's the colors.
oh,
And then we have the compositions. I really want to see. I really want to see what our sheet was.
it's still from around that show. So this percentage is on the check, right? To the extra box.
Alright, you can come and grab your batch makers now. They're available. Peppers. We just did the 10 lab
Sodium.
on Tuesday, and those guys threw charcoal all over the place. I've been trying to wipe it off. There's still piles of it everywhere.
So for flux, are we supposed to put down the amount we put in, or just which type it is?
For which question?
For the flux. For
So
this
the
table.
flux identity is a sodium flux. So sodium carbonate in particular. But yeah, that's
Okay, because I was wondering, does he want the
right.
Like,
The
we
weights
all
are
just use sodium.
right. They're recorded here. That's back to when we were changing up fluxes, but those created so many different problems. We just settled on sodium and just talk about the other.
And do you want us to do more than just batch that we did through today? Document, or do you want us to?
Well, you can at least do the 5 that we did here, but you've got access to the others. If you want to analyze the entire set, there's enough space, so there should be almost enough space to do all that. But at the very least, it has to be what we did in this section.
So we just synthesized and now it's shaking.
Yeah, it's not like we're worried about
It should not be that sensitive.
Click like this.
I think we already put that.
I did not know those switch. Oh, wait a second. Okay. I figured it out.
Cobalt.
That's already gone. It's a process because the initial batch was fire that's the use from the oxide. It's a temporary the Bible is too. So for us, there's a copy in there. Yep. I want you to understand the relationship with color.
If we had wanted the cyan, we should put it in color.
So you're going to use that as one identity would be like cobalt 2+, silver 2+. Those are the ions that actually exist in that glass.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So cobalt. They had 1.04 iron. Plus 8 iron cobalt. So 1.04 plus 0.005.
Oh, they say just how much of iron they have.
Just iron. Alright, so the ion
What was the plus?
is yeah, that's the good. Especially that it's basically cobalt and
Okay, so in this case, the one we can also be considered a glass former silica is the main glass former, boron and iron, and aluminum would be blue and the copper. sodium carbonate is always just flux. Potassium carbonate is flux substrate. Some that are only one, some that are two. So what does a glass form? This is just a flux. We didn't use potassium or anything. Potassium carbonate is a flux that's stabilized. Potassium carbonate
For the total heavy together.
where did you get that? Are you sure about that? I mean, actually, I think there is a lot of it, but I don't feel that. Let's check. So your batch, again, you said? It looks like it's sort of sodium carbonate and washing solution are two different forms of sodium carbonate. So it looks like Alright, so that's all you're going to do.
But that's what I assumed.
Combine those two. I don't want to do it. It's not really going to change much on the batch rate outcome. That's just.
I'm surprised that some blue as amber.
Yeah, the potassium I would have noticed, most likely because those always do it so weird. They pour out much like a Hershey's Kiss. They don't make a kiss. They just, and then that always explodes in about 20 minutes. Check. So those are pretty good. So does that answer the question? Yeah. I don't know how I missed it, but I didn't notice that was my fault. Yeah.
So it's just going to be next to
It's not going to do during
something
so,
that there's
yeah. So everything's just stretched out.
That's perfect time to screw everyone.
It did shift a lot of things around. And I'm a bit behind on that for grading, so I'll have to hopefully get that all caught up.
Oh yeah, did you see the stress? Our the big no has a smiley face. Stressing.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I did not see that. I noticed that it had a different feel to it.
It's got eyes and it's got a good face.
Yeah, there is. It's like a monkey fish right there. It looks like a. Depends on your angle, but
Yeah.
there is an angle where it kind of looks like a lake or something.
I didn't see any other ones that look like that.
Yeah, this one has like two eyes, mouth, kind of like ripple for the hair cut to it. So there it is. Just put it down in the. I don't know if I use the word pure. The harder it is true. And potentially the more unstable it becomes, it's hard to keep all those forces balanced. So what happens is you'll have an area where the force imbalance is in check. Like if I sort of take a picture of this giant pencil and stretch it around this, and probably create a weak swing scenario where it's hard.
What are you gonna do?
Tighter the band, stronger the force field. This is a semi-quantitative approach.
Oh yeah, do you want a picture of the
That's not really giving you exact stress numbers per se, but you can tell where the stress is located. So around the rim, there's a lot more stress. And so now, for glass, commercial glass, you have a annealed glass. So the stress has already been relieved from these. So when you put this under, it doesn't show much. Maybe this is how, I don't know, it's any effect.
And now it's just a big pile of tin.
So if we took this, put it in the oven, open it.
Question one is just, well, A is just these are kind of.
550 Celsius, 600 Celsius. Presumably, I haven't really perfected this, but that would slowly allow rearrangement of bonds.
Glass
crack
flux.
and lubrication and
Okay.
stretch compared to what
Flux
it
slash
should be, and it's all those stretched bonds that are actually changing the polarization vector,
Oh, I'm ready.
curving it as
I'm
the light goes
50.
through, and that's why we see it called polarizing, is that it's changing the orientation of light as it's absorbed, it's re-emitted non-stretched bonds. And all that cumulative effect makes the granular pattern misstoppable. But those would bleed toward the center and spread out, and then eventually fade until this should just be basically a disc with no features. And that's how you could tell that you were done. Yes. Now, ironically, unstressed glass breaks in large shards along long break lines. But safety glass has been intentionally internally stressed. And the way they do that is instead of having a radial pattern because of how you're pouring it, you take the glass and you put a heater panel set, and they create hot spots that are evenly spaced so that it puts a stress pattern that's predefined. So then if it starts to break, it shatters into little tiny squares. And so safety glass is safety glass because the most you'd ever get is like a scrape or a cut of little shards. You wouldn't have get guilty. And there's some accidents where people get sliced by huge pieces of glass. It's a scenario because large shards of glass are wildly hazardous compared to fragile type shards. So safety glass has been stressed so that if it ever does break, it goes into a million pieces instantly. There's lots of YouTube videos about safety glass. Car windows, shower doors, it's like tap, 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 and then it just explodes into a million pieces. Instead of like throwing a baseball through a window, it's like big shards come dangling in the casement. Totally different behavior. So when car windows are like double pre-stressed glass or plastic interlayer, so when that gets hit,
So it's
it shatters in a million pieces, but they're glued to this interlayer so that they don't go flying into the cabin compartment.
plus 8.
Eventually, you break that down to
Yeah, plus 8.
there's lots
Now you can get the custom
control
control
that
it
you
into
can do with this.
so
Beyond, I mean, we're doing the absolute simplest thing to do with this. Pour it on steel liquid. But that's a whole area of study. And then there's bulletproof glass, which is then takes it to the whole next level. So
do we have to put other ones too? Or just
this is hard enough that if you pour glass just right, you get up in the water and make what's called a punch leakage drop. It's so hard that
And if
you
you
shoot that with like a point
so the result will be in
the bullet splits so that it doesn't break the glass. It's so hard, it's like a shield. But yet on that one, if you then put this tail that comes off this blob of glass, you nip the tail and it's like instantaneous. So that smart video, he keeps trying to
more symbols.
camera setup that's fast enough.
There's more
see it. You really go. It's something. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
There's those swimmer guys.
Yeah.
They really
There's like these like giant sheet of glass.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see if it works out for an arrow.
All the way down the tiny.
Oh, I can't take.
That must be a follow-up video. I saw a video of theirs where they were dropping stressed glass and then looking at how it shattered. This one sounded like they were like controlling it more. Because for that one, I think they just set it on the ground and were just dropping these panes of glass. And you see it like touch and then it goes through the whole thing instantaneously.
Did they test any of them with
You know what? I don't
see
see.
how
I'm doing
fast it
this.
shatters against the wood?
Yeah.
Hero.
That's what I did.
What's that? NEO?
Because I've seen the one that they did where they actually shot
NEO.
into it. They were comparing the
And
time.
they cracked it. Did they actually show it go side by side? I'll have to check that one out. Those guys are funny.
So you can just.
But you take an idea and well, what about this? What about this? Now there's just so many different variations. It's amazing what's out there.
What was it? I forget some ingredients.
And pre-stressed glass shatters like several times I think the speed of sound. And it's really fast.
So there's only one left to do now.
Oh, great. These, occasionally we do a remelt of some of these. I have turned these into color before. And these are hard to break. That internal stress. I'll put them in a Ziploc bag and I put them on the floor and you start like tapping with a hammer. The hammer's like bouncing. So finally you find a weak point and you're like crunch and then you can crunch up them the rest of the way. But the initial hardness of these is surprisingly high.
It's like a fist pump.
Kind of.
In that it doesn't have a tail that makes the pump that'll vibrate from the surface and break the rest of it.
Curvature yields strength in these scenarios. So these flats are a weak point. But a Prince Rupert's drop approximates a sphere. And that's why those are so durable from any angle you're hitting them. I've seen guys wail on an angle and nothing happens. And then they're shooting with all these different rounds and nothing happens. It's like, how can this be possible? And then you just kind of take a little clip of pliers and just touch the tail and the thing explodes. It's like those ones are so odd. But you get some of those aspects when you try to break it down. It's really hard to say. We could clearly do more with it, but yeah, there's some other things that got partially worked out where you just take this and you crush it up.
Yeah.
At that point you call it frick.
I told my missus like, what figure?
But when you're doing like remelt for like art glass, we call it frick.
Because you look like the only part for the craft is just this part. The rest is like still a crap ton of working on it.
I want to make this into a 3 or 4 week lab.
I'm guessing there's a part 2 about the results.
Make the glass, convert the frick, add it, refire it, and then you could literally make glass forms and little like beads and stuff, but I don't want to turn this into like art window. But I feel like this is sort of the industrial way to just measure it, but if you made it stable, there's a lot you could do with it.
I would say I would like to try.
Yeah, we'll try to make that happen. I just don't want people putting it in their pocket and then it turns into this, which would happen. And that has some really sharp edges. I had a student once that came in just like this. They're like, "What is this stuff?" And they're trying to dig out a piece and they slice up their fingers. Like, oh, it's a beaker of glass. You know, maybe I need to come up with a different way to store it. Warning, this is sharp. These corners sometimes have little slitters.
These are some cool looking crystals.
Yeah.
Those emeralds?
But then again, don't know if I have it out right now, but I have a beaker of razor blades, and I had a student once say, Dr. Ray, there's got to be a better way than having us dig razor blades out of a beaker. You know, what could possibly go wrong if you're digging razor blades out of a beaker? Yeah, I know, we just got lots of beakers. It's easy to store in. I'm sorry. Be careful.
Oh.
So now we're finally done with glass for this semester.
All right. Perfect. See you later.
See you later.